Or have a bad memory and put everything in writing.
Exactly. So I wanted to get the recording going so people at home don't think we canceled. But just to answer your question, because we were doing a little bit of Sefaria scavenger hunt. Sefaria has worked very hard to remain non-denominational, trans movement. They do not want to be associated only with one movement. And if you go to the sheet section, which shows who's been doing it, if you look at the contributors, you have contributors from all the movements of Judaism. Now, that means that they are very hands-off, right? So they are not trying to say, this interpretation is correct, this interpretation is
kind of the Wikipedia of the Judaism.
It's very much like that, exactly.
So not always so. It's better, the Wikipedia is problematic.
So
that.
Wikipedia isn't problematic, but that's a whole nother conversation. Wikipedia gets a bad reputation from people who don't like people who are lazy and who go to Wikipedia and only look at Wikipedia as one source. But Wikipedia as a general resource, the research I have shown has shown that it is about as accurate as other encyclopedias and other resources. Now, if it's a hot button issue, it's something that is really, really getting everybody excited about today, then yes, you get into edit wars and people are trying to skew things. There was a funny one in not yesterday's debate, but last week's debate, where it had the entry for Bloomberg was edited. And it said that Bloomberg had died on that date, and the cause of death was Elizabeth Warren, because she had attacked him so aggressively during the debate.
But
it was fixed like that.
But Safari, you say that there's not wrong information. Someone is checking.
It's a peer check and all of that, and they nowadays they get a lot of their information not just from individual contributors, but many of the publishing houses are willing to share. Really? So if you sign up for their newsletter, they'll say, now we've just gotten this, and they get big info drops from some of these other publishers.
So what is the advantage of the publisher? Okay.
So the advantage is, of course, that people would still want to buy the book, and it gets them publicity that people now know that these translations, and information is out there. So I guess that's what the publishers want from it. But some of it might just be that the publishers are trying to promote, study, maybe.
And regarding my question, so I need to go back there and try to look for other examples.
Those will give you more examples, but the basic principle is, yes, that there are certain rare exceptions where the principle overrules what you thought the specific rule was.
Okay, that was powerful.
Did they do all those links themselves, or did they have an algorithm to do all the links for them?
From what I understand, both. Because there are some places I have found where the links have not been put in yet. Some places I have found where the links are an error, where it points to like the wrong verse or something. But most of them are correct. And from what I've read, they had some that were done automatically if it was clear where it was being, if it said in the commentary, Psalm such and such and verse such and such. But some other ones were quotes, and then people had to actually say, this quote comes from that particular book.
Right. I didn't know if they just searched everything for the quotes through an algorithm.
Like I said, it's both. Because sometimes the quotes are not precise. Sometimes the quotes are, the same quote can be from many different books. It's not just, they ran it through the computer. All right, so we are on chapter 7. And I thought we might reach chapter 8 today, but now with our late start. Is someone at the window?
Yep.
But I thought the door was open.
Yeah, it is open.
No, we were studying until now.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
We were studying, Rabbi.
It was open.
Well, Steve closed it.
No, it was open.
Yeah, because we have the security guard, so it should be
He
open.
was out there.
So we didn't start late. We were studying.
We were studying, yes. We were studying. We studied Bar Kochba. We talked about the Hashmoneans. We talked about the Gemara from the Daf Yomi. It just took us 15 minutes to actually get the camera on, and it's taken us 20 minutes to get to the Mishnah. Did someone not see the door?
Yeah, it was open.
Okay, good. But chapter 7. All right, so we're going to get chapter 7 knocked out of the park tonight because it's only 4 Mishnayot long. It's a very, very short chapter. You'll see that it's all very thematically linked. And then maybe tonight, if we're lucky, we'll start chapter 8. Chapter 8 is going to move our topic completely into the topic of inheritance. Chapter 7, did someone take all the copies of chapter 7? Okay. And if we're lucky, we'll get to chapter 8. All right. I noticed that Richard did not want to read first tonight.
Yeah.
You didn't want to read first tonight, right? So you sat over there. Yeah. All right. Or from the time we should start on the right hand and go this way.
What?
Okay. Chapter 7, Mishnah 1, underway.
If a man said to his fellow, I will sell you a coarse space of soil, and it contained crevices 10 handbreadths deep, or rocks 10 handbreadths high, these are not included in the measurement.
Go ahead and read the next line.
But if they were less than this, they are included.
Okay, so here's the problem. I want to sell you enough that you're going to, excuse me, I want to sell you enough room so that you will be able to plant a core's worth of seeds. Now, they did the calculations for us in the commentary. We're looking at about 20,000 square meters. All right, it's a farm. What do you want? 20,000 square meters. All right, so you got 20,000 square meters of land. It's a farm, right? It's a good sized farm. Now, the question is, if I'm selling you enough land that is 20,000 square meters, and remember the language in the sales is very, very important here. But if I say I'm selling you a core's worth of land, what happens if in the land there are rocks or there are holes that are in the way? Did I sell you enough land or not? Right? If I took a string and I stretch it and measure, it's enough.
Should be. It's part of, because it's natural. The seller didn't put the rocks there.
But
it's part of the nature.
I didn't say I'm selling you, 200 by 100. I said I'm selling you a core's worth, enough that you could plant a core's worth of seeds. Can you plant on rock?
No.
Can you plant in a tiny little gully that nothing's going to grow in? Again, here we're talking about 10 tefachim. Tefachim is a handbreadth, so 10. We're looking at like 20 inches deep. So you're looking at a rock that's that high, right, or a crevice that's deep. And is that usable land for the farm? And the answer is no.
Not by this for the animals. Maybe you can save one part of the land for the animals.
But how did I say I want to buy the land? I'm buying it in a measurement that's equivalent to amount that's going to be farmed. So if I'm buying it for farming and I say I want to buy this much land, then the land has to be usable.
Where do you see that?
Soil.
Because I don't see any place that say that is for farming.
What's the term that's used in yours for he says I will sell you?
A coarse area of soil.
There, a core's area of soil. What's a core? A core is a measurement of seeds.
Measurement of what?
Seeds.
Yeah.
The little
30 CA.
right
Yeah.
of seeds.
Yeah.
Right. So 30 seah is the measurement of how much seed. Right. It's like the pounds of seeds, and those seeds are going to be used to spread over this land. So if the land isn't usable, should it be included in the sale? Right. And this is where we get the precise language. I will sell you a core's space of soil. Then anything that is beyond this 10 tefachim, this 20 inches or so measurement, is not included in the land. And that means if there's these, I would have to add, a little bit extra because this isn't usable. However, next line.
If he said to him, about a coarse space of soil, even if it contained crevices deeper than 10 handbreadths or rocks higher than 10 handbreadths, they are included in the measurement.
Because say about.
Exactly, because it's around that much, right? If I say to you, I will be arriving, or class will start at exactly 7 o'clock, then the class better start at 7 o'clock. But if I say the class will start around 7 o'clock, then 7:15 is no problem. but actually I was here before 7, but that's not the point. It's just there's a difference in language. If I say it's exactly or around. And that's what the rabbis are saying you have to be careful with. If you want to sell somebody this much land and you know that there are non-usable spots, then when you say it, you have to tell them it's about a core's worth of land. But if you say it is a core's worth of land, there better be land that is worth a core.
But what is the minimum? Because you have in every land could have stones or whatever. What is the minimum or the maximum amount of stones that you can have in order to invalidate that?
10 tefachim up, 10 tefachim down.
That for stones.
For the first category, right? If I say it's a core's worth of land and there are little rocks, tough. You move them, right? That's your job. You're the farmer, you deal with it. If there's a little hole, fill it in. It's your job. If it's a deep hole, now the land is damaged. The land is inadequate.
How much is 10 tefachim?
About 20 almost a meter, a little bit less than a meter.
It's deep.
Yeah, it's deep. Yeah, we're not talking about like, a little dimple, right? I mean, you could break your leg. it's
Almost a
Full.
meter.
almost, it's like 2/3 of a meter.
Hey,
3/4 of a meter? I'm not good at metric.
But the
How many
about,
inches? Sorry.
It's about between like 20, 25, 26 inches, somewhere in there.
but when it says about later on, is that ever meant to be like a 10% margin of error?
No, so in this particular case, no. Now, if you say it is, about and none of it is usable, and the person bought it thinking that it was usable, then there's possibly a chance for saying that I've been defrauded in this. Right? If I say I want to buy about a core's worth of land, and you say I've got about a core's worth of land, and it's concrete, right? Then no, that's not going to be considered a valid sale.
What about if
But if it's just rough land, and there are rocks and there are valleys and all of that, and you deal with it as best you can, then it's welcome to your farm.
So if only 80% of it's usable, you can't set it aside?
Then it would depend on whether or not there was actual defrauding, if there was a real ta'ud, a real error in the purchase.
Because later on it'll say 10% or more. You can.
For certain types of purchases, yes.
So what happens if you have?
But land has its own special rules for purchase prices.
What happens if you have like 50% of the land is 9.5 tefachim?
Yeah.
It's
Then-
almost 10. It's 9.5.
So-
and it's a lot, but it's really big and everything is big.
What do I say at the beginning of every class? This is only about if you get to court. Right? So if you show up at the court and the court will tell you, look, all right, can you guys compromise? Come to an arrangement. This guy has a reason to be upset. This is what you told him. This is what you sold him. Work out a compromise. And if they both say, nope, no compromise, if it goes to the court, if it's only 9 tefachim, it's not a problem.
So it's
But
right
between
now.
9.5 and 10, it's not a big difference. Still, 9.5 is a very deep and are big stones.
Right. So if your tax bill is $1,000 and you give them $900, does the IRS say it's not such a big deal?
No.
Bright line rule.
Right. It is, but because there has to be. There has to be a line of this is acceptable and beyond this is not acceptable.
Red line in the
You'd be
sand.
surprised how often there's not.
What's that?
You'd be surprised how often there's not a bright line rule.
Very often indeed, which is why, like I said, why the rabbis in this kind of case, if this was to really come before a Beit Din, they would encourage compromise. Right? They would say, all right, so maybe the land really wasn't worth the full amount, and maybe you didn't quite understand and wasn't sated for. Work it out, guys, okay? But if it goes to the court and the court really has to come down only on the facts that we've now discussed in our hypothetical, 9 tefachim is technically a valid piece of land for sale. Even though it's rocky or even though it's got holes, it is technically a workable piece of land. It's going to take a lot more effort than if it was perfectly smooth like Kansas, but it is still a workable piece of land by the definition that the rabbis have set. So-
Check it out. Before you buy.
Okay. So as we have said in every chapter of Bava Batra, this is why you check. This is why you agree. This is why you write a contract. This is why you don't use sloppy language.
If you live here in America and you want to make aliyah, and someone said, don't worry, I have a piece of land for you.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree to
I
that.
bring my redemption.
And
I will live in Israel.
They show you
and
a
I have
picture
my
from their phone, and
Exactly.
the picture looks beautiful, but Yeah.
So not always you can check the land.
Buy tickets to Israel and go check the piece of land.
Right. And this is, I mean, this is the truth, that if you don't, you could be legally without any recourse. You know, technically, you might not have a way to fix the issue if it's not what you thought it was going to be.
So if you cannot check, you don't have a point in front of the Beit Din.
Or you don't have I mean, if you didn't
Like in
check.
the fence, no, if you cannot, because you live far.
Right.
And
So
discover
you
this,
let's
can you
okay.
use
So
it as a-
2,000 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
2,000 years ago, somebody lives in Rome, and they decide they finally have had enough with Rome. They want to return to the land of Israel,
Yeah.
and so they need to purchase land. And so they send a letter to somebody who lives in Israel, and they say, "I want to buy the land. Here is my shaliach. My shaliach will make the deal, but the shaliach doesn't actually check the land because he wasn't told to check the land. Whatever the issue is." Right? We ignore all of that for the moment.
Mhm.
The land is purchased without anybody from the buyer's point of view actually viewing it.
Okay.
And the terms of the contract are vague enough that there is no reason to believe that it was an actual deception, right? If it said it will be about this much land, it will be, you know, about this big, then yeah, there would be no defense or there would be no case for the buyer to claim that he was defrauded. The person said what it was. The fact that you wanted perfectly smooth ground but didn't ask for it is not me, the seller's fault. Now, again, the Beit Din would encourage compromise. They would encourage people to work this out and try to find some other way to reconcile it. But technically, legally, if you make a bad purchase, but the purchase is not fraud and it's within the other bounds of the law, it's just a bad purchase.
Rabbi, we keep going back to the thing of sloppy language, though. But I buy stuff every day: bread, food, whatever. Sometimes even wine. And people generally don't write contracts for this stuff. So wouldn't that be the majority of purchases being used without contract?
Absolutely. So you go to the marketplace and you want to buy 2 oranges. You're not writing out a contract about that. It's just taken care of on the spot. On the other hand, when you are making a contract for a larger purchase, like 20,000 square meters of land, right, or you are purchasing a sight unseen animals that are going to come from next year's flock, or you're purchasing the produce of a particular field, then it's time to actually get things clear, because those kinds of purchases where there is ambiguity, where it's not I'm buying this, but I'm buying something that I can't see, can't touch, then you really need to be more careful. And I would bet that if you were going to buy a car online, that there would be all sorts of language about exactly what you are purchasing.
That's one of those things that says click here.
It says click here to read all of the details. And yes, many people do not read all the details. But if you got something that was not what you wanted, but the details said that they were covered, try taking that to a court. And the court's going to laugh you out and say, look, just because you didn't read the user agreement doesn't mean that you can complain.
But what happens if the shaliach that you trust didn't do the work?
Okay, so if the shaliach is negligent,
throw him under the bus
yes,
and say,
yes, absolutely. If the shaliach is negligent, if the shaliach breaks the terms of his appointment, then yes, there are grounds for the contract perhaps to be invalidated, but more likely the shaliach will pay a fine for the damages that he did. If I say go buy me a diamond and I give him 5,000 shekels, and he buys a diamond that's only worth 2,000 shekels, but he pays 5,000 for it, he's going to owe me 3,000 shekels. Unless there was fraud, in which case the seller was in trouble, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
I thought I saw something on the Hasidic diamond merchants where they make all those trades with no contract. They're basically handshakes and stuff.
There is a lot of that, and that's partly because diamonds and other types of super luxuries fall outside many of the rules of what is an appropriate price. It's called ona'ah, right? The idea of defrauding a person doesn't apply to super luxuries, because a person will pay whatever a person wants to pay for a diamond. And it's not food, it's not a house, it's not anything that a person needs to live. I'm sorry, you don't actually need diamonds to live. So there are the rules for ona'ah, for defrauding, are very different. Now, if you lie and say it's a diamond, but it's really a piece of glass, that's a problem. But if you say, oh, I got a diamond and it's worth $50,000, and if you take it to another diamond expert and they say it's worth $5,000, you don't get a refund, right? If you were stupid enough to pay $50,000 for a shiny rock, you're paying $50,000 for a shiny rock and you're stuck with it. You can tell you don't exactly care much about diamonds. Okay. What's that? Oh, of course. We can make him read. We can make him read twice.
Oh, and it's a long one.
Finally, a long one that isn't yours.
Yes.
All right. So now we're going to get a different way to purchase land. Same issue, but we're going to see, we'll see how it goes. So 7-2.
Okay. If he said, I will sell you a core space of soil as measured by a rope.
Finally, the solution, right? Don't tell me it's how much seed. Actually tell me it's a core's worth, which is 20,000 square meters, and then measure the meters, right? Measure it with a rope. That's what they're talking about here. Get out the tape measure. Good? That all the problems will be solved if we just use a tape measure, right? Not quite. Onward.
And he gave him less. The buyer may reduce the price. And if he gave him more, the buyer must give it back.
Okay, so if there is any error of too little or too more or too much, then it has to be adjusted for. Either the buyer will pay less because it's only this much and he missed out on that piece, or if they measured and it was this, the buyer is not allowed to use it. Even though they agreed to what the measurements were, if the measurements were wrong and he got too much, he has to give it back.
But who say that is wrong? Only if the buyer after that measure again. And if he has it in favor, he will
or the seller, right? The seller could check the rope and realize the rope was the wrong length. There's all sorts of ways that it could come out. Hire a surveyor. He could go and the seller could be measuring his own property for another sale and then realize that a mistake was made. There's lots of different ways that a mistake could be discovered, not only in the interest of the buyer. So if there's once you put a number on it rather than once you have that number of distance, then any much too much or any much too little has to be adjusted for in the final version, because otherwise it's deliberate deception. It's considered fraud. Just like if I sell you 5 apples, there need to be 5 apples in the bag, period. Right? Not 4, not 6, 5, done. Remember that when they give you too much at the store. All right, Yerach, onward.
Okay, but if he said whether less or more, even if he gave the buyer a quarter cab space less in every se'ah space, or quarter cup space more in every se'ah space, it becomes his. If the error was more than this, the reckoning must be made. All
right, so the math works out, again, thanks to our commentary, who deal with these very irregular units, to about 1/24th. If you're off by about 1/24th of the space that was supposed to be, either too much or too little.
1/24 meters square.
Yes. 1/24th of that. You can do the math. If you're off by that much, 1/24th?
1/24.
1/24, yeah.
Okay, so this is the
percentage of error.
Okay.
Right, so if you say, but only if you said more or less, right? If I say I want a cob's worth of, a core's worth of land measured by a rope, more or less, then there's a margin of error of 1/24 for how much it could be more, how much it could be less before we can complain. But if it's 1/23rd, right, now there's a problem. And now I can take you to court, or we have to work out an arrangement for me to pay you, you to pay me, we to hand it back, all the other things that can happen to make the sale be corrected. Make sense? So even if you say more or less, the more or less still has a limit of how much more or less would be valid. All right, next part.
Okay.
What does he give?
Okay. What does he give him back? It's volume in money, but if the seller wants, he gives him back the land. And why did they say that he could give back its volume in money to strengthen the power of the seller? For it, in a field containing a core space, there would still have remained 9 cab space, or in a garden, a half cab space, or according to Rabbi Akiva, a quarter cab space. The buyer must give back to him land.
All right. So when there's an error in the buyer's favor, if there's an error, right, for the buyer needing to return a surplus to the seller can decide whether he wants it back in land or whether he wants it back in money. Now, well, why? Because look, just because they made a mistake and gave me too much land, why should I pay extra for that? Right? I only agreed to pay for the core. Why am I paying for the extra 1/23 that went over? Right? Why? Because otherwise I could get a little extra, still, just over, and say, sure, I'll give you back the land, and the land is going to be this. Good luck using that. Right? It's valuable in the sense that it is a percentage of 20,000 square meters, but it's useless for a farmer. What's he going to do? Come every day and just walk along the thing, dropping the seeds for growing a little bit of food there?
Build a path.
Exactly, build a path, and that
sell
causes
it to
its own
someone
trouble.
else.
That causes our own trouble,
Field.
exactly. So the issue is you need to give the seller a little bit of a lever to make sure that whatever arrangement there is to fix an error of measurement, it will still be usable when handed back. And the seller's the one who gets the preference here because the buyer already has a usable piece of land. And the question is whether or not the seller can get back something usable too.
I thought if the buyer had to give back the land, then he no longer has a usable piece of land.
No, the buyer has to give back the extra, the excess.
Right, but then the seller could reclaim the whole thing, though. Didn't it say that?
No.
I read it wrong. The seller, because they give the seller the power, the extra.
The extra. We're talking about the surplus here.
So the seller has the right to either demand more money or take back the money.
Exactly.
What happens if the buyer can't afford more money?
And then it gets more complicated, and then probably a loan would be put out and say, when you finish, we'll work out some sort of arrangement without interest, of course, to make it work out. But yes, because if I sell you what I thought was a course, this is where it gets complicated. It's, I drew this like it's a farm plot in the middle of Iowa, but most of the farms, if you've ever been in Israel or seen pictures of Israel, are not just big squares on empty ground. Right? They're on hills, they're on terraces, they're in valleys and slopes, and there's all sorts of things all going on around you. The ground is irregular and the shapes are irregular. So what happens, if it's more like this that we're dealing with, then I think it's about a core's worth, but it turns out to be just a little bit more. But this is the only piece of land I've got. So how do we handle that? I can't, am I really going to just take this back and that's going to be the extra that I get back to make it? Just give me the extra, right? Pay me the extra and we'll be square. That's the kind of frustrating issue they're dealing with here.
So they need to pay in money.
Right. Now, if the person really could not afford to do it, then they could just cancel the sale. But do you think the seller is going to be happy with that outcome? Because the seller wanted to sell the land. So what would really be the most likely solution? Compromise.
Yeah.
Plus, the buyer could have already agricultured it.
Begun to work the land, perhaps. There are lots of things that make this more complicated, which is why going to the Beit Din is so much fun.
And what happens if the seller is owner also on a property adjacent to the land? Can he return back? Receive back the little piece of land? Then
it's
because
much easier.
Yes,
it's much easier if the seller already owns another piece, and which was common. I'd have my piece of land and I'd sell off part of my land, but the edge we would now share. Right? Then that's very easy to take the little bit of land and have it be attached to my land. No problem. All right, last line on this page.
And not only must he give back the quarter cap space, but all of the surplus.
Okay, so this is where we get into my drawings are a bit okay. We'll do this verbally. We measure the land, but there's an error, right? And the error is more than the 1/24th. So did anyone do the math of how much 1/24th is out of 20,000? No? Okay, well, we'll do it sort of roughly here, right? So my 1/24th, I actually got 1/23rd, right? Which is a larger piece of land, more than the 1/24th margin of error. Do I give back just the difference between the two? Or do I give back everything that was taken, everything that was extra? And the answer that we're getting here is you give back everything that was extra. Right? You can't say, but there's a margin of error, so I get to keep the extra 1/24th and I'm just going to return the difference. No. Once we know that there was error, then you have to give back all of the extra, not just the part that pushed you over the edge into inappropriate, but all of the extra has to go back. All right, once we measure, that's what we're following. Make sense? All right. I didn't realize this was going to be so exciting. You guys are really getting into your real estate deals. 7-3. I can't wait till we get to inheritance.
So it's 476 square meters.
476. Thank you. Square meters. So if there was an extra 500 square meters, I don't just give you back 24 square meters. I have to give you back all 500 square meters. Thank you for the numbers. That makes it a little bit easier than dealing with fractions. All right. Chapter 7, Mishnah 3.
If he said, I will sell you a piece of land as measured by the rule, whether it is less or more, the condition, whether it is less or more, makes void the condition as measured by the rule.
Go ahead and keep reading.
And if he said, be it less or more, as measured by the rule, the condition as measured by the rule makes void the condition, be it less or more, according to Ben Manas.
Okay. Basically, if you say something that is contradictory, says Ben Nanas, if I say I'm going to sell it to you by the rope, more or less, by the rope means precise. So you can't say I'm going to sell it to you precisely, kind of. The two words don't go together. And the same way, if I say I'm going to sell it to you kind of precisely, that's not the same, right? You cannot be almost correct. You're correct or not correct. You're almost or not almost. You have to pick one or the other is his argument. Make sense? Okay. Part 2.
If he said, I will sell you a piece of land by its marks, its values, and the difference is less than a sixth, the sale stands. If it is as much as a sixth, as much as a sixth, the buyer may reduce it.
Okay. So if I'm going to sell it to you by, there's a rock here, and there's a tree here, and a river along that side, not measuring it, but I'm telling you what the markers are for the edges of the land. If I tell you that, and it turns out that the amount of land I thought was inside this area is different than what you thought you were buying, then it has to be more than a sixth before there's a problem. If it is less than a sixth, then if it was as much as a sixth, then we can reduce the price to make it appropriate. And if it was completely wrong, beyond the sixth, then the sale is actually canceled, right? And we start over again.
1/6 is a lot.
Yeah, 1/6 is a lot.
Because in your example, a river, in case of the winter, can change.
Well, it can change, and it's allowing for. So the 1/6 isn't just about the amount; it's about the value, right? It's not. That I should make that clear, right? We're not talking about 1/6 of this. I shouldn't have written that there. Too many drawings. All right, let me pick a color. Let's imagine 20,000 square meters costs, right, 3,000 shekels. And it turns out that this is not actually 3,000 shekels worth of land. but the price is off by a sixth. Not the size, the value.
The value.
Right? The value is off by a sixth. That's what's being argued about here. Right? It's like if you go to buy a car and the value of the car is off by a sixth. It's not that the car is 1/6 smaller than you thought. It's the car is worth 1/6 different than you thought. That is what they are debating. If it is less than a sixth, then you know what? It's okay, because there is room for pricing fluctuation. If it is more than a sixth, then it can be canceled. If it's exactly a sixth, then you can settle up the actual price difference. Make sense? All right, that one's not so bad. 7-4. You don't get to escape the tongue, you have to read.
No, it's Richard.
He already read,
When?
just now. He had the short one.
Oh, finally. Okay. If one say to his fellow, I'm selling you half a field, we compromise between them and he takes half his field. The half on the south.
Hold on. All right, so your Mishnah doesn't include the additional commentary notes that ours has. So we need to explain. How do you divide it and give a half? Do you divide this number or do you divide this number?
20,000, I think. No?
You divide the value. If they only say half, if they say half the distance, then yes, you divide the measurement of space. But if you just say half the land, then you're dividing half the value of the land. So if this half is really, really expensive and this half is not, it could be that this is worth 1,500 and this is worth 1,500. That's half, right? Maybe this land is too dry. Maybe it doesn't have
sense.
right. Now, one of the great places where we see this exact thing come and be played out, just a little more historical, is in the book of Joshua. When the land of Israel is being divided up among the tribes, it's being divided by the value, not by the size.
That's why Shimon had a huge piece of land.
But it was cruddy land.
Yeah.
It wasn't worthless, because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten anything. I mean, then they wouldn't have been fair. And the amount of land that each person got when they were allocating to each person depended upon the value of the land too. So it wasn't that every Jewish person, when we came into Israel, each got 10 acres. Right? Each person got a certain value of the land of Israel. And
that's explained a lot. Thank you, Rabbi. I always thought, why tribes agree in that division when someone receives a lot or receiving the cost or better
Right.
areas and someone else worse. So it's because it's by the values, not by the size. Okay.
And then even within the tribe, it was divided originally by value. Because the idea that it is, and this is going to lead us into our next chapter, the idea is that every person got an equal share of the land of Israel. And an equal share isn't an equal piece of dirt. An equal share is the equal value of dirt. The same way that if you had children and you die and you leave them your estate, you leave them your money, they don't want the same size gift from you. They want the same value from you. So if one of them gets the diamond ring worth $5,000 and one of them gets a car worth $5,000, they can't complain. They both got the same amount. Even though one got something this big and one got a whole car, it's equal. And the same is what happened with the land for dividing up the land of Israel. Because all of us are the children of Jacob. We all deserved the same value of our piece of Israel, not the same size. Make sense? Okay. Onward. We're going to do the same a couple different ways.
The half on the south I'm sending you, we compromise between them, and he takes the half of to the south.
All right. So if you do it not just divide, but by north and south, same thing. Just imagine there's a compass with this is north and this is south. Again, we divide it by value, not by drawing a line east-west. Right? We draw a line wherever the value would make the transition. All right. A little bit different.
And he ascends to the place of the fence, a ditch and a narrow ditch.
Go ahead and how large? Yeah.
is a ditch? 6 tefachim, and a narrow ditch, 3.
All right. So we talked about this a little bit briefly before when we were way back at the beginning of Bava Batra.
So tefachim, I never remember.
Tefachim is the handbreadth. So it's about 2.5 inches.
So
Depends on how
6
big your
times
hand is.
2.5.
Yeah. So it's about a foot. So what is this talking about? We'll change my pens one more time. If you are the neighbor of someone and you are working together to build a fence, do you remember we talked about this way back at the beginning of Bava Batra? There has to be a buffer zone. That's the space that the fence, the wall sits on, right? And half of that is going to come from one guy and half of that's going to come from the other guy. So the buyer has to still provide half the space for the wall that's going to divide the land between the two of them.
What happens if I decide that I prefer that will be all in my land and he pay me for half of the price?
Then you go back to the beginning of Bava Batra and you can negotiate that with your neighbor. Right. So that, and you can negotiate that before you make the purchase. But this is what's talking about the default. Right. The default is I sell the land. You can't complain when your neighbor says, okay, but we're building the wall down the middle of our two lands. You can't say, but no, it's my land. It's like, no, you're a neighbor. You have to share in the space needed for building a wall, right? Because a wall needs a footprint to sit on. Okay, we are going to press on. I want to do 8.1 because it's going to get us started. And I really want to get the laws of inheritance because I think they're very interesting and hopefully you guys will like them. Unfortunately, the printer decided to print only on the front. I don't know why. So it used more paper than necessary.
No.
Chapter 8.1.
Back to me.
That's back to you.
There are those who inherit and bequeath. There are those who inherit but do not bequeath. There are those who bequeath but do not inherit. And there are those who neither bequeath nor inherit.
All right. So every time you get a passage like this in the Mishnah, this is meant to be a catchy mnemonic, something that is easy to remember. And basically what they're saying is...
What is bequeath?
Bequeath means leave to someone else. Did I get this right? Right there. This is bequeath and bequeath, inherit, inherit. Right? There are some people who bequeath and inherit. There are some people who bequeath but don't inherit. There are some people who inherit but don't bequeath. And there are some people who neither bequeath nor inherit. What is this talking about? It's saying there are different relative relationships, right? Father-son, father-daughter, brother and brother, those kinds of different relationships. For some people, if one person dies, they will leave money to a person, right? If a father dies, the son will inherit, right? But for some people, when the father, let's look at the categories, but for other people, there will be the person who inherits. If they die, it will not go back to the original person. You following me? Right? There are 4 different ways that the relationships might work. For some relationships, no one gets nothing from no one. For some relationships, the person will only inherit, but it never goes back the other way. So think about father and son, right? Well, actually, let's look at some examples. That'll be much better because we're going to get an example of how these all work. So Aaron, read me the first example.
These inherit and bequeath.
Right? These are the people who do both. They both inherit from someone, and if they died, they would leave it back to the same person.
To the same person or to the children?
No, the same person.
But it's dead already.
If they die before me, or if I die before them. Not the same person in the same family, the same relationship category.
That's why, like, if I
hold on. So give me an example. Who's this category?
A father as to his sons, and sons as to the father, and brothers from the same fathers. These inherit and bequeath.
All right. So let's take father and son, right? and son and father. If a father dies,
Yeah,
it goes to his son.
correct.
If a son dies before his father, it goes to the father.
And what happens if the son has already sons?
With that chapter 8, we're getting there.
Okay.
Right? This is just the basic structure, right? We have to get the basic structure before we can get more complicated. So
But why the father receives from the son?
because if let's say like you have a 20-year-old son, he has no children, he's not married, but he has his own property, he has his own wealth, he's his own shepherd, and then he's killed by a wolf. Who gets his property?
Yeah, he doesn't have any family.
The parents.
If doesn't have, so that situation, if the son doesn't
Like I
have
said,
any
it's going to get
father-
more complicated, but yeah, the pure situation is
Okay.
just unattached son. What his property would come back to the father.
Even if he is married, though, doesn't it still go back to the father and the wife gets maintenance?
We're going to deal with more complicated situations, right? Let's deal with what the Mishnah is giving us so far.
The son no have family.
At the moment, no family. Later on, we'll give him some family.
Or the ketubah where they've settled.
Later on, we'll give him some family. All right. Part 2, or 3, I guess, technically.
A woman as to her sons and a wife as to her husband.
Whoop, I think you skipped one.
Whoops, did I?
A man as to his mother.
A man as to his mother and a man as to his wife, and sons of sisters inherit, but do not bequeath.
All right. So this as I said, our father's son, we'll use that as our example. Right? Our father's son goes both ways. Right? Father dies, goes to the son dies, goes to the father in a pure situation. However, in this next situation, make sure we're here. We are over here. Mother to son, as I believe the first example on the page. Well, yeah, man to mother. It goes only one direction. Right? A son can inherit from his mother, but a mother does not inherit from her son.
And if he's a widow,
Same thing with his wife, by the way. Right? A husband can inherit from his wife. The wife does not inherit from the husband.
So if there's no inheritance from like a convert or something, it would.
But that gets more complicated. But let's like work out the family tree a little bit here. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit more in later Mishnayot. But let's imagine you've got a mother, right, and she dies. Or so let's keep her alive, right? We got a mother, and she has a son, and the son has his own flocks and whatever. He's 20 years old and doing his own thing, but he has no family of his own. He dies. When he dies, his property does not go to his mom. His property goes looking for a brother, or for his father, or for his father's brother. It goes looking for the other male
for
relatives.
his uncle or some cousin,
Absolutely.
and jumping the mom.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. Now, let's go back to why I mentioned it. Let's go back to Israel in the time of Joshua. If it goes to what? Well, Joshua is a little bit right at the beginning. Why was it divided in those tribes?
Before Joshua, also with the 5 daughters.
Slofachat, they're later in this chapter.
Really?
They show up later. Okay, so you're ahead of the class. But
Okay.
we're back in the time of Joshua. Like I said, the land was divided in equal value to everyone, to all the tribes, and then to each individual person. But that land is passed father, son, father, son, father, son, because it's in the tribe of Judah, it's in the tribe of Dan, it's in the tribe of Naphtali. But a man from Naphtali might marry a woman from Shimon, from one of the other tribes. If she could inherit from her son, then that meant some of Naphtali's value is being moved to Shimon, being moved to the other tribe. And now the tribes aren't equal anymore. Now the tribes are becoming unbalanced. So because the tribal affiliation remained with the patrilineal line, the male line, it meant that women couldn't inherit from their children or from their spouses, because land, which was the main source of value for the ancient world, would have become redistributed to all the other tribes, and then you would have had basically economic collapse, because larger tribes would have had more women would have married into the other tribes, those tribes would have then, and over time, have given inheritance to the women, that money would have come back to the women's tribe, and then the larger tribes would have just sucked up all the smaller tribes, which eventually did sort of happen with the tribe of Judah, but it was trying to be prevented by this rule.
Yeah, but didn't we learn a while back that if you married from the same tribe, you could still inherit? It was the woman inheriting from the father.
We'll deal with men inheriting from fathers. Let's get to the third category.
If she was a convert, though, and her son died with no heirs, would that mean the property goes whoever claims it first?
No,
Oh.
because the son. Oh, you mean so? Because there's no. They would go to his father.
No, she was a convert with no father. She was a.
But his father, the boy, had a father.
Unless he was a.
Right. We don't. No, we don't believe in immaculate conception.
Not immaculate conception, but the father was for a reason gone or.
But the father would still have a family, right? So if the father was dead, then you go looking for his brothers. If the brothers are dead, you go looking for the
They
cousins.
could both be converts, so the father and mother could be a convert. The father died.
Yes, it is potential to have a purely hypothetical situation where you have a person who dies leaving no possible heirs, right? And there's just 0 people to find on the family tree.
But it'd be
And then it becomes first come, first serve.
even before the mother, right? If the mother's the only remaining,
She would be first come.
all right, but it'd be a first come first serve.
Right, she could get it first because, she's there.
Unless she was on.
Right.
So I think that his original question he tried to ask what happened if, for example, not immaculate, but what happened if was an accident, okay, and the dad disappeared, ran away, so exists but not really exists.
Right. Then you try to find the heir. And if the father is presumed dead, he's presumed gone. I mean, there's all sorts of rules of holding property in trust for people, because you can't just give it to whoever you want as an inheritance, which again, later in chapter 8, we're going to make this really, really clear that the laws of inheritance are in the Torah. And so we can't just say, well, Bob hasn't been around for a while, so let's give it to Frank instead, because Frank's a good guy. If you're doing that, you're breaking the laws of the Torah.
So you can,
Now, there is a way we're going to find a loophole by the time we get to the end of chapter 8. But
so you can make a trust also a minor.
of course, yeah. And how you deal with the land of orphans is a very big deal in Jewish law. Yeah.
And back when he said it goes to the father, if the father's like a Roman or something, he doesn't count.
If he's outside the Jewish line, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Third category. I think we're on, yeah.
A woman as to her son, and a wife as to her husband, and brothers of the mother bequeath, but do not inherit, and brothers from the same mother, but not father, neither inherit nor bequeath.
All right. So we got matrilineal brother and matrilineal brother. They don't do anything. Right. So you have one man, and he has a wife with a boy. And then he has another wife and a boy. And one boy dies, and there's no other male relatives. Would it go to his brother by his father? But that was would it go to the brother that was from the same mother, but not the same father? I had it backwards. Right. You have one mother.
That sounds like a Mexican soap opera.
Okay. Well, first of all, I said it backwards when I started. It's getting late, so we're gonna wrap this up before my brain stops. You have a mother. You have a woman. She gets married to a man and she has a son. Then the man dies. She gets married to another man and has a son. And then that man also dies. So both boys have inheritance from their fathers.
Correct.
And they share one mother. Those two boys would never inherit from each other. Even though they're brothers, they're matrilineal brothers, not patrilineal brothers. They're linked by their mother, not by the father. And so the lines of inheritance don't work. This one doesn't give to that one, and that one doesn't give to the other. Now,
is that true even if the father of one of them was not Jewish?
You're really obsessed by this. No, so
Wait, I thought the father wasn't Jewish. It goes by the mother, and the only reason it's because he takes the line.
So
of the mother.
can we deal with the simple solution, the simple questions, right? Because this is already complicated enough for people that are not used to this inheritance pattern, right? In America, we're used to the idea of people write a will and the money goes wherever they feel like, right? In Judaism, that's not how it works until it does. Like I said, we'll get to that question later on, but we need to see the basic framework before we get into the more complicated situations, because this is so different than the American system. All right, so let's just make sure we've got the basic system here. Okay? Okay. So if you have these two matrilineal brothers, they don't do anything for each other. Done. If you have the woman and her sons, or a wife to her husband and brothers to of the mother, right, they bequeath, but they do not inherit. So a man to his mother, I think actually I wrote this up already. What did I have? Oh, I have, okay. A woman as to her, I see. Okay, yes. So, right. So I already wrote up the one category. The mother will give to her son, but her son won't give to her mother. And the son will give, let me just make sure I'm getting this right. A woman will bequeath, but do not inherit. Okay, I see what I did. I put the one in the wrong category. The mother will give to the son. She bequeaths to him, but she cannot inherit from him, right? That's the one we already talked about. And then the other case is the son can get from the mother, but he does not give to her, which is the opposite of what we've already said. Right? So a man will give to his, a man from his mother, a man from his wife, a son from sisters, can inherit, but it doesn't work the opposite direction. That is our case over here. And then which one?
Mother to the son. And
The mother can give to the son. The mother can bequeath to the son,
Yes,
but the mother does not inherit from the son.
correct. And
Over here, the son can inherit from the mother, but the son does not bequeath to the mother.
it's not the same.
Yes, it is.
It's the same. Both
Yes.
cases are the same.
Yes. Well, it's the corollary. It's the inverse.
Yeah. Let's say exactly the same.
Yes.
The same logic.
Yes.
And the same happen within the wife and the husband. It's
Yes.
are together.
Exactly. All right. Those are our four main categories of inheritance. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to get into some more details when we get further into chapter 8. And then we're going to eventually see that there are ways to give what you want to give to whoever you want to give it. But this is, again, the default. And the default's always important to start with, so then we can understand how and when and how and why not other types of changes can happen. Good? Good. So review chapter 8 for next time.